It all comes down to this. After 3 days of grueling competition, all of our players dueling it out and trying to get all the way to the top. Dreams have been made and many hearts have been broken along the way, but now it is finally time to crown our champion in Masters Tour Asia Pacific Online. Gia, what are we looking at for our finals?
Extremely strong runs throughout the top 8 and through the Swiss. Alutemu having felled Tice to get here, and Leta having felled Bunny Hopper, each very, very consistent European champions throughout the entire Hearthstone. And now they're clashing here. Lorinda brought it that if Leta manages to take the win against Alutemu, it means he will have beaten a GM from every single region. And if Alutemu takes the win, it means we will have our first ever APAC Masters Tour champion.
So much on the line for both of these players. I mean, for Leta, of course, he is the non-GM out of these two players, so securing a win here would not absolutely 100% certify him as a GM for next season, but he would look to be in a fantastic spot, even despite how competitive Europe is in terms of qualifying through to GM. Whereas Alutemu, on the other side, for him, in my opinion at least, it's been a story of always the bridesmaid, never the bride, as he has got so close to the global finals, the world championship, through the series of GM that he's been fighting through, but never quite able to actually secure that spot, falling to the likes of Surrender and Glory along the way. But he does have now a real chance to put a strong win in terms of his competitive career, even if it isn't within the Grandmaster circuit.
And looking at his lineup, it'd be something we're very unfamiliar with seeing, even though you and I are very used to casting Alutemu throughout the Grandmaster season. It's him without a druid for the first time in pretty much the entire of 2020, I have to say. Instead, he's playing Highlander, Questlog, and Secret Rogue with his Demon Hunter banned out. Notably, also no Warrior in this lineup.
Yeah, this is a bit of a departure from just the good decks strategy that we've seen from most of the players, which, his opponent in Leta has gone for. But as you said, the Demon Hunter that he has gone for, I am a big fan of, and I think is very deserving of a ban here. As even though we can't see it here, is the version with Cobalt Spellkin, taken out the Warglaves of Azzinoth, which many players have described as being unplayable now since the nerf happened just a few days ago. But on the other side here, for Leta, he does still have his Demon Hunter live and ready to go, but it's a little bit of a weirder build, I think it's fair to say, compared to the standard, I suppose if you want to call it that, versions of the deck.
That's right, the Escape Mana Saber 1 copy managing to sneak in there, probably helping to smooth out the curve, because as we've talked about the nerf to Warglaze of Azzinoth, and because the nerf to Twin Slice previously makes Glavebound Adapt a lot more difficult to play on turn 5, that extra mana going into the turn 5 could be a huge help to him, and we've seen that card come in clutch for Leta quite a few times already previously. But for Al, I have to say, his lineup looks like it was built with Priest in mind, having still included Highlander Hunter and Questlog. And even though this field has not had nearly as much Priest as people were initially expecting when the nerfs were, and Alutemu has been just playing a lot of solid Hearthstone and managing to get there with decks that aren't including arguably two of the strongest classes right now.
Yeah, I think weirdly enough for Alutemu, his quarter-final match was where he was looking maybe the shakiest out of all of his performances. I think as he went into the semi-finals, he was looking much more on form, because it's worth saying that for us at least, we definitely expect a lot of him, even if he may not be as well known to the Western Hearthstone scene as some of the European or America's GMs. Make no mistake, he is very, very well respected and considered one of the best Asia-Pacific players, if not the best, by not only his fellow Asia-Pacific players, but a lot of the other communities in Europe and Americas, ever since his strong performances way back in the HCT system, always being up at the top of the ladder. He's got what it takes, and it's time to finally put a win on the board for him in a Masters Tour. But before he can do that, Gia, he's got to win these games. And first up, it's the Rogue versus Demon Hunter. What's shaken up in this matchup since the nerfs?
Well, not very much, I would say, because the Rogue nerf to Galakrond often doesn't come into play until much later in the game. I would say Rogue's core package of being able to steal away the tempo with these cards, backstabs, the Blackjack Stunner, even though it's not with the active secret right away, is very, very useful here. And Leta has had the 1-drop start, gets that backstabbed away, and the second one is a huge draw for Alutemu, because now it means he has an answer for the follow-up Bone Chewer Brawler, which without a Seal Fade can be a very problematic card for Rogue to deal with.
It can indeed, and it really does prey on the Blackjack Stunner that Alutemu just played on one as a 1-2, even despite the fact that he already had a secret in his starting hand. So clearly for him here, very much oriented on just getting anything that he can on the board rather than sapping them back to his opponent's hand, which clearly here is working out fantastically.
Yeah. I think it spoke to a lot of the shape of his hand at that time, which had 2 miscreants, so it really looked like he was going to be coining one out, and so it would take quite a couple more turns before you're able to go for Secret Stunner. So he says, I'm just playing this out here as board presence to eat up some 1/1s if an Umberwing comes down. He was unfortunately met by Bone Chewer Brawler, but fortunately picked up the backstab to make it all smooth out anyway. But Leta has the refill available, the Battle Fiend and the Fell Wings coming down onto the board. But if Alutemu can stave this off, suddenly he's looking to be in the clear, because Leta's next play is not a card you want to be putting down on curve.
And Alutemu's got quite a few ways to go about this. The most explosive play on this turn, as I see it, is of course the Ethereal Lackey and the Goblin Lackey rushing in the Ethereal and hoping for a good spell. But this was the alternate line I was looking at, where you hold back on the Ethereal, I think primarily to guarantee yourself a Miscreant on the following turn to keep the Lackeys rolling. Because this is just where Demon Hunter really starts to struggle. Keeping board control in the face of this onslaught of lackeys is a very, very tall order, especially when you're presented with a turn like this, where Tempo Altruist is your only card playable.
I think it's safe to say we're going to be seeing pretty much a pass from Leta, and I have to say from Alutemu, the use of Dagger over Lackey there I really, really like, because even though you are damaging the Miscreant, it puts it at a health total where Leta is like, I wish this more health so I could have a better target for the hero power and swing onto the, with his Umberwing weapon. And now Leta does have to consider what you were talking about of the Altruist and pass, but the thing is, even if he takes a swing, it deactivates the Glaive Bound for next turn. So oh my gosh.
That's why I think the play is Tempo Altruist and trade your 1/1 into the Miscreant, because otherwise you're locking the Skull. You're far from guaranteed to get it outcast on turn 6, almost guaranteed to not get it outcast on turn 6, unless you play Altruist this turn, Glaive Bound on turn 5. It hurts me to say it, but I think that was the way to go. Leta, however, is holding back completely on this turn.
The counterpoint to that argument, I suppose, is because he knows whether Altruist gets played this turn or not, he is falling behind on board to a certain extent. So he's maybe hoping to unlock the Skull the right side somehow over a couple turns. I think it's really wishful thinking, but the argument is that he's so far behind that he needs to get the absolute dream, which involves an Altruist turn later on. So it's really tough to say from that point. But Alutemu here, taking the free turn for development. I like the look of Cold Blood, because now he can feel like he's the aggressor, actually.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any obvious way to activate the Vendettas with the primary way being Alley Cats, and that's only like a 30% chance. Oh, sorry, the Pharaoh Cats, which are far from guaranteed to activate it off of the Reborn minion. So, like you say, Cold Blood, it can be used to trade up if you need with a Lackey into a Glaive Bound, or just turn the pressure around very rapidly.
I think Alutemu knows from the fact that Leta held onto the swing that a Glaive Bound is very much on the menu for this turn. And so it feels a little bit bad to be playing the Miscreant and just feeding that battle cry, but he importantly gets the Lackeys online, and oh my goodness, these are the 2nd and 3rd Goblin Lackeys he's received so far, and that is absolutely huge in this matchup, especially when you can pair it with Questing Adventurer.
Right, but how do you go about this? Because he can technically stick a safe, quote-unquote, Questing Adventure on this turn with just Questing Cold Blood. But is that too vulnerable? Do you want to save up for a bigger one-turn Questing Adventurer buff?
Well, he can put it up to 4/4 if he goes Questing, Goblin Lackey, and then rush the first Goblin Lackey. So
you have to tank the 6 then, right?
No, you can rush the 1/1 that's already on board, then rush a Goblin that you first played, questing ends up as a 4/4 there, which doesn't die just to Warglaves on turn 6. But it is very expensive because Goblin Lackeys are some of the best responsive tools you have in this matchup, and it just takes the snap of a finger or the blink of an eye before Demon Hunter can turn things around. So it is kind of a reserved play from Alutemu here. And also, you have to double check if Warglaves is even in the list for Leta. It's just a one-of copy.
And it was a crucial top deck there for Leta, I will say, because otherwise we were looking at having a, maybe an Altruist if he was lucky, but more likely possibly just Skull having to be played to draw 3 cards, which would have been absolutely brutal. But now the curve is smoothed out that little bit more. Looks like it can just trade into the shield if nothing else better comes along. It's, I think, looking a lot better than I expected for Leta.
I have to say, though, Alutemu is rewarded for holding on to both the Goblin Lackeys and making use of Cold Blood, which is a lot harder to use when you're behind, versus the Goblin Lackeys, which are ideal when you're behind and feel like a bit of a frivolous use when you use them to further push an advantage. And if that advantage is just 1 additional health on the questing, which can still die to Glaive-bound Adept, can still die to I-Beam Hero Power, etc., then it makes a lot of sense here. But Alutemu's value is starting to run dry a little bit, and Leta picks up the gas.
That is what you are after here, with both backstabs having been used for Alutemu. Blackjack Stunner already thrown down just as a 1-drop at the start of the game. The reactive capabilities of the deck are definitely going to be tested here at this phase of the game.
The lackeys generated off of these Praise Galakrons are going to be extremely relevant. That's a great pickup for Alutemu's next turn, but for now, he needs to pick up some shooty guys, as the official name has now been coined, or additional gobbies, I assume.
That's right. Tice may have been eliminated from the tournament, but with Twin Tyrant there, the spirit of TTT lives on.
Man, these are very expensive pickups from Alutemu. I think he would have been happy to see a Bright Wing here compared to any of those cards. That's how bad it was for him.
Yeah, as happy as you can be to see Bright Wing.
Yeah. One more shot at a relevant lackey for right now, and that is a very relevant one.
Is it worth throwing down over the dirty tricks? Would you just tank a little bit of extra damage in exchange for possibly more cards?
I like the look of it because the way his curve is shaped with the 8-drop into 9-drop dragon, it doesn't look like he'll have the time to play Goblin Lackey anytime soon, and also any cards drawn off dirty tricks. But of course, going for the dirty tricks allows him a bit more flexibility with the cards he draws off the top, and he doesn't necessarily want to be playing Tin Tyrant. But wow! Huge for Leta. Enormous.
Absolutely huge. And I've got to say, at this point, even though I was advocating to just throwing down the Altruist earlier on in the game as a 4-2, he is going to be very happy that he held on to it at this point, being able to copy it, or combo it, sorry, with a bunch of these cheap cards off Skull of Gul'dan. This is a difficult board for Alutemu to swing back in his favor, and even if he does, we're still looking at Altruist being able to swing it back for Leta.
It is very scary, but this Twin Tyrant will put a damper on a lot of the pressure. There's many premium targets here for Alutemu. The alternative being the Seal Fate alongside the Shield of Galakron still allows him to deal with the Battle Fiend and the Bone Shore Brawler, which are kind of the priority move here, which I should say.
That is true, and you could even start with Seal Fate and then just see what Lackey you get, because maybe with like Lackey and Pharaoh Cat you can just go wide on the board. So I do actually like the deviation here in the end, just for the more guaranteed clear on the important minions.
Yeah. Wide on the board is an interesting perspective here. I feel like that might lock out his future choices a little bit if he's going to commit all of the lackeys, because suddenly he'll be floating bits and pieces of mana for the next few turns, which is never a great feeling in terms of efficiency for Rogue. But I think he's prioritizing getting this wave, and he might be thinking, after this wave, I'm finally going to have some room to breathe, because that's Leta's Skull Plate. But little does he know the second one is in hand, and the Warglaves is online.
He is just scurrying to try and clear this board time and time again, but Leta has just had the rebuild turn after turn. So difficult for Alutemu to get any kind of a hold on this.
Now this presents kind of a crossroads for Leta, where if he wants to unlock the skull, it's going to take a turn later than now. So maybe this is the Altruist turn,
Yeah.
a little bit subpar, but it just lines up a lot neater with how his mana is working.
I think it's perfect. You know, he was obviously testing first of all for the ambush there, just to see what happens. Where should he send this Guardian Orc Merchant? How's it all working out? But now he can clearly see, he obviously doesn't know whether the secret was the dirty tricks that was discovered or a bamboozle. But either way, he is allowed to go all face here and put the pressure on Alutemu and say, you basically have one turn left to turn this around before you die.
And the Divine Shield is super clutch here because Alutemu can't just swing into the Guardian Aug Merchant and use the Twin Tyrant to get back in the game because the Amani Berserker will survive. But the alternative for Alutemu is Shield of Galakron into a Prayer. I feel like both game plans revolve around eventually top decking Galakron. And I say eventually, but I mean the very next turn. So if you're trying to give yourself the best position going into that, I'm still leaning towards the Twin Tyrant.
I will act as your scale.
He is instead just hoping for, I guess, Kobold Lackey, maybe Titanic Lackey to taunt things up.
Now it's Bluegill Warrior or Rusty Raider, but not available. Sorry, Henchclan Hogsteed. What is Rusty Raider? 5/8, right? Yeah.
Mic drop. That would be good. You're not wrong there, Gia, technically. But in the end, it's not enough to save Alutemu, as he gave it all he could. He had a remarkable early game, I will say, with double backstab, double evil miscreant, the one drop in the form of the stunner as well. But in the end, it was just such an onslaught from Leta, clearly signifying the power of this new, more aggressive, stripped-down version of Demon Hunter, where even though it doesn't have such a strong mid-game presence with the nerf to the Warglaives, the early game's just so brutal.
Yeah, I have to say, looking back, I wonder if we could have entered an alternate universe where had the Twin Tyrant come down on the 8-mana turn, was there a little bit more flexibility for Alutemu there, because he would have had a big minion and still some lackeys in hand to try and push back. But it was a very, very clutch Altruist from Leta. And we have been singing the praises of Alutemu throughout the lead up, but Leta is a player that has a lot of respect from his own community as well. Former teammate of Bunny Hopper, we know that. And Casey, also a member of that practice group, definitely saying that Leta deserves to make it this far. He's been on the grind, qualified to every single Masters Tour leading up to now, but for the first time has put in some very good results, and I think is in a prime position to take the series now.
Couldn't agree more. I think he is a very, very deserving player, right up at the top in terms of overall wins in the Masters Tour system. I believe going to be in the number 2 spot now after this incredibly strong run here through Masters Tour Asia Pacific Online, and with a 1-0 win under his belt now with the Demon Hunter. He only has to get a win left with the Hunter and the Rogue. However, Gia, it did appear in the previous series up against Bunny Hopper that the Highlander Hunter was the struggle deck for Leta, where it almost got 0-3 reverse swept. Do you anticipate a similar situation here, or are you thinking it should be fairly easy to still get a win?
For virtue of the fact that Alutemu has quest lock, I think that it's still got that possibility, and that is the deck I was queuing up here first, but it runs into the Rogue from Leta, which I would say is a great matchup for quest lock. Maybe not so much as before the questing adventures were added into the mix, but now that this wave of nerfs has hit and quest lock evaded it pretty much entirely outside of Dragon Queen Alex Draza, I think it should still be looking in a good position. But the opener from Leta is fire.
Yep, what do you know? It's the cards you want. This is the dream. Outside of like second Shadow Step just to go absolutely bananas. Pharaoh Cat into Coin, Shadow Step, Pharaoh Cat, Edwin. It's insane. And even with the follow-up of a Candle Taker on 3, this is looking gorgeous.
Oh my gosh, that's just going to be an 8/8 Edwin aside the 2 health from the Pharaoh Cat. I don't think Alutemu even has a dream of being able to have this Dark Skies deal enough damage to the board. Oh
Backstab
my goodness.
Kind of an interesting proposition because it doesn't actually add or subtract any health from the board in terms of the Dark Skies maths. But it does make your Edwin a little bit less susceptible to Moarg Netherbreath or Netherbreath Soulfire. Obviously, however, you have then used a backstab, so Leta is holding back instead.
Yeah.
Ooh.
The Moarg Soulfire would be the only available combination of cards on this mana. So Alutemu looks like he has to preload this Dark Skies. We can know nearly for sure that the Ferocat will die, and then the Edwin will go down to a more manageable health total for the following turn, but it is painful.
That is an interesting top deck. Your opponent has just set your Edwin to 4 health, so I feel like they're kind of telegraphing that they're going to finish it off with a Nether Breath or Soulfire next turn. Do you think... Am I crazy for wanting to go for the questing there?
It's not entirely crazy, but Caster Vision, we can see the exact punish is second Dark Skies, which was actually available that turn. I think maybe for Leta, he could be thinking that because the curve is looking fine even without the questing, he has Candle Takers leading up into the Shield of Galakron and Togwaggle. He doesn't take that much of a risk. And the Candle Taker is technically even stickier of a minion for right now.
That's true. The Candle Taker does do a fair bit of damage as well. 3 attack is nothing to be sniffed at this early on in the game.
Yeah. It's a clean board clear for Alutemu here if he wants it. Second Dark Skies into Mortal Coil. Perfect usage of mana, but that's his second Dark Skies down the drain. And I feel it's not a very comfortable position to be in for Warlock after having used both of them. But the fact that it lines up perfect usage of Mortal Coil, I'm still leaning towards those 2 middle cards.
It is so close. I would be so tempted to just throw down tap Nether Breath here instead to gain the health, keep your hand economy high, because that is where Quest Warlock really starts to struggle to ever close out a game, because at that point, if you're low on hand size, even if you find the plot twist to complete your quest, you're only shuffling like 3 or 4 cards in, which is nowhere near enough to be game winning.
It's true. Has been kind of the dream for Leta so far with that Edwin opener into the double good reborn minions, and there's a limited amount of those, let alone the ones that can be played before 7 mana. But now, Alutemu has an option yet again to go for Dark Skies and clean up the second half with Rain of Fire. It is so expensive, but can he afford to keep tapping here is the question.
He's going to be taking a beating, and he has already used 1 Nether Breath. Obviously, that makes the healing a lot worse, but there's still 2 of the Brood Mothers left in the deck as well.
I feel a lot of the time you have the license to play for a pseudo as if you don't have a quest game plan, which is just remove after remove if you have the follow-up. But for Alutemu, the hand is looking very dry for the clear this turn. Again, we're going to see him in the end, though, play very scared for his health total. Still manages to get a draw with a coil. But it's a question of whether he wants to commit the Rain of Fire also.
I mean, I think it's very likely he has to do it over this turn or the next turn, so I think you just do it now because the effect is unlikely to be that much more impactful.
It's a small consideration if you're expecting exactly this card to come down on turn 5, because the extra 1 health would have unlocked Soulfire as a removal possibility. But getting to that point, it seems like Alutemu would just play his entire hand for removal and not actually come up with a long-term game plan. So I also ended up liking the Rain of Fire usage there. Sense Demons at least is a Alutemu can guaranteed get at least 1 Aranasi Broodmother for much needed healing.
He can, but I was looking pretty heavily at the Keladin there, just to cleanly use the mana. I know that he can likely heal up for the majority of his health here, but it does leave an awkward minion to deal with on the board, and the fact that the shield so perfectly protects the other minions behind it and allows him to start growing these questings, or just going wide with Miscreants, set up for a Togwaggle. It's looking nice, I will say now, for Leta in this point in the matchup.
Very much so. There's not a great way to set up questing here without floating a bunch of mana. But if he goes for the delay game plan of Titanic Lackey and Evil Miscreant, I'd also be hesitant to play the lackeys he gets off of that because of Togwaggle and also because of the questing adventurers. So we could be looking at here of questing Titanic. That also seems a bit weird because you lose your best combo activator for the Miscreants and Tog. So looking at it again, might just be Miscreant. Okay. Questing Miscreant and also stabbing the Miscreant to make sure questing is not in the range of crazy nuts.
Right.
Very heads up.
That's very clever. I wasn't really looking at that exact line, but I think it's pretty smart. The Crazy Netherwing could have been pretty disastrous there, or at the very least slowed down his win condition quite a lot, because now Leta has the dual-pronged attack here. He can come from the angle of just making a huge questing and hitting them for 1,000,000, or he can just quite happily play Togwaggle on the next turn and draw through to a bunch of 0-mana cards, boost up the second questing. Still, I like his chances.
Yeah. For Alutemu, the turn happened, or the first part of it happened really quickly. I was looking heavily at Caladan Soulfire for that turn, but starting off with the Questing Explorer makes me think he was very specifically looking for a better usage of his mana. Maybe picking up the second Nether Breath would have been huge to pair off with Moargs, but doesn't get it. So now we end up with what looks like is just going to be a River Croc Zephyrus. I mean, Bloodfin Raptor. It's the minion on board that was a River Croc. Oh, okay. That's not a big deal. Gets shuffled back.
Yeah,
that is a big deal, is the dog right there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how impactful that is one way or the other. Probably just pretty bad for Leta. But I will say, you know, this feels pretty deliberate to me as well. Backstabbing the Miscreant at the end perfectly leads into upgrading it cleanly with the Witchy Lackey. There's a perfect plan for all steps in this thought process.
Somehow the Zephyrus is already active for Alutemu, but on this turn, I don't think it gives him anything more than stall. And so he's going for plot twist, get the quest completion, and he has held on to Kela that long. There's a decent chance he can get it right back with the 6 mana remaining, and if not, he has a tap.
Well, let's see. A Broodmother is a fantastic way to start things off because he needs health and board clear all at once here. Because Leta's running the stealth build, which again means 2 copies of Eviscerate ready to go. Very, very scary.
And if the Tog had 1 less health, that would have been a pretty perfect board state for the Netherwing and Mortal Coil, but now it's just not coming together. Alutemu has his last Nether Breath to try and just stay alive on board, but he knows that the wand is there.
The healing for Alutemu now is significantly diminished. We're looking at the second Nether Breath having been used without a Moarg Artificer. One of the Aranasi Broodmothers in hand. Leta here can just go for the throat.
And outside of the healing being gone already for Alutemu, it's also less burst that Leta even has to worry about. Alutemu cheesing out a win if that discounted card is Malygos. I think, as you just said, as long as Leta keeps the pressure going, he's in a great spot here. He has second questing to be able to push that initiative. And the Conjured Mirage, at the very least, is +1/+1 for questing, if not much else.
Oh, yes. I think Leta here, his primary consideration is, can I play the questing here and still feel good about myself?
Sure.
Obviously, it wouldn't be strictly wrong to avoid playing the questing first and then go for the wand, because you can look at how your options are shaping out. But in the end, he holds back on the questing entirely, clearly not being his game plan for this turn, and instead keeps the card draw rolling whilst also piling on the damage.
The Gallocron too, that's huge. He is still putting together a lot of pressure that does not go all in Twisting Nether or Caladan, which is the first of them available to Alutemu as an option this turn, but it feels extremely slow. It means he doesn't get to fit in a tap as well. So maybe Alutemu is instead looking to go for that crazed Netherwing, can fit in a tap, and if the tap doesn't give him anything significant, he has Soulfire as well, but that is almost all the burst used for Alutemu.
Yeah, that's getting real scary at that point. So at the end, he just leads off with the plot twist, clearly saying this hand's too expensive. I want to draw these cards instead, and also hopefully find a couple of Broodmothers along the way, and also, if he can, activate Zephyrus.
Or get Caladan. He left himself many outs
That's
here.
true.
Gets the Zephyrus, gets the Broodmother for healing, and now has Malygos for it's Alutemu special. He can do that with Rain of Fire right now.
Is that correct though? He deals himself a lot of damage. His win condition may just be gone then.
It might, but it's still a 4/6 minion.
He's got to go.
And a clear
He's got to
board.
go right now.
Oh my gosh, what's he gonna go for?
Whoa!
Netherwing. this is even more dangerous than the Malagos Rain of Fire there, at least for his immediate health total.
Absolutely.
If Leta
It's questing
can
time
put
now.
together 9 more damage, it's not impossible. He has a bunch of invokes, he has Goblin Lackey in hand, and even if it's not lethal this turn, there is so little healing left for Alutemu, and I think that's why he was so hesitant to use a Zephrys at any point, because he probably has it earmarked as a healing touch or holy light.
This is so close to just lethal. With Plague of Madness, he's like 2 damage off, I think, here, from being able to close out the game.
Oh, it's crazy.
Prep Seal makes a lot of sense. I believe that fully invokes the Galakron, ready for the Claw to come in next turn for yet 5 more burst damage that the Warlock really cannot deal with.
How much damage are we looking at for Alutemu next turn, though? The Rain becomes unplayable because he's going to take a lot of damage this turn. Or is it? No, he can play the Rain. It's playable. So now Rain plus Soulfire is 17 with Malagos, and then Zephrys... If the Soulfire...
It's 15, right?
15, sorry, yeah. So Zephrys could just be lethal here if the Soulfire does not discard Zephrys.
Fireball would be exactly lethal then, right?
Yeah. The mana is there. And it's good odds to not directly discard Zephrys. Oh my gosh.
He's working through it in his head. He would survive a 1 health if he can find it.
It's huge there. I wonder if Leta was supposed to somehow fit in the Kobold Lackey possible there. Starts off with a tap because the mana is there. And so he has the best chance of not discarding Zeph. Alutemu optimizing. What is the Soulfire going to discard? Zephrys was playable. He does it! Oh my god, Derek. Just away from Leta, and Raven and Saldo were talking about how Alutemu has just had the best hero power taps post-quest this entire tournament. Yet again he does it, and in the most clutch situation and one of the worst possible situations had he hit anything else other than Malagos, no less.
I am glad that you spotted that, Gia, because I have to be honest, I wasn't even considering lethal there. With a Rain of Fire already having been played, both of the Nether Breaths having already been played as well, it looked like there was nowhere near lethal damage there, but thankfully you and Alutemu were able to spot the lines, even weaving in the hero power for maximum odds.
Yeah.
That was a insane way to end out that game that I thought Leta was just so far in the lead on the entire time.
And I'm thankful that your arithmetic is on point. So with our peanut brains combined, we can actually approximate what's going through Alutemu's head there. But I can tell you what's going through Leta's head is, oh my god, how did that slip away from me? He was in such a great spot right from the get-go, getting that early Ed win, but somehow Alutemu's patience, fitting in the plot twist even when it looked very scary, and holding on to the Malagos when I was saying this looks like a pretty good clear on that previous turn, allowed him to go for lethal right on the following turn. It's huge there. I still have to wonder, could Leta have put Alutemu down to 6 or lower to play around some Rain of Fire possibility? Of course, it's so fringe because you can never expect counter card is Malagos, but it's a lot of things to consider.
So many things to consider, and I do not begrudge Leta whatsoever, because even with the benefit of hindsight, it's still not possible for me to perfectly figure out if everything was workable in that turn, let alone when you only have the short time that a Hearthstone turn allows you to come up with the decision. So in the end, we do see Alutemu equalizing things here, and that means that we are left with a mirror match in terms of the classes, even if not exactly in the archetypes, because Gia, it is the the Stealth Rogue available for Leta, while it is the secret version for Alutemu. This version, however, or this matchup looks fairly similar for either side, with Highlander Hunter versus Rogue, and we have seen Leta get the best of this matchup already.
Indeed, but that opener is looking not the fastest for Hunter. He has Scavengers into 3-drop of choice. Desert Spear is so impactful in this matchup to make sure you get to clean up the lackeys and kind of the distraction minions so you can make room for those big swings of Rotnest Drake sniping the perfect target, and also gets the best option between Zixor and the Diving Griffin, between which of those two to buff. But Alutemu, if he wants, can play that Hanar, and that, as soon as I said it, that looks really bad because of Scavenger's Ingenuity.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look so good on this turn, but one thing I was quite curious about was actually whether or not he should have played it on turn 1, because Coin Hanar into Secret looked pretty juicy to me, actually.
It really did. I guess that makes it a little bit awkward going into the 5 mana turn, because it looks like he would want to coin into either of these 6 drops, but I'm really heavily looking at just an ambush here now. Yes, to lose the Hanar value, but it seems that it's his best answer to anything buffed by the Scavenger's Ingenuity. If you do just leave the Spy Mistress Stealth though, then he still has an answer with Backstab. You can fit in Hanar. Ooh, or that!
Ooh.
It's not often I suggest 4-4 Edwin, but doesn't look bad to me here.
Going into turn 4 for your opponent, that is an awkward number for Hunter to deal with, I will say.
It's just that the coin seems extremely valuable for Alutemu's hand, and the way everything is even cost, so just having the coin to shore up your odd cost mana turns makes some sense to me here. But there's also that option for going Hanar's Secret, developing Ambush huge to help protect Hanar, and he can get the value train going to make his following turns less awkward that way. And then he can guaranteed pick up a Paladin spell, so the Edwin is playable as a 4-4 on the following turn. But the backstab is always happening, so a good way to start off the turn.
Yeah, I mean, I was almost wondering if he should even go for Hanar Coin Ambush and save the backstab just to get a 6-6 Edwin and accept that the Hanar is going to die there, but maybe I'm getting a little bit too ahead of myself, and I suppose the Zixor wouldn't even be necessarily killable there in the end.
I do think that the extra stats on Edwin is less relevant against Hunter than in other matchups versus prioritizing that you stick multiple minions, because Hunter is similar to Rogue in the fact that they like to deal with just one minion at a time and insta-pick the Paladin Secret even if it's complete garbage here because combo activator.
Yeah, exactly. You can even just keep the secrets rolling if you'd rather instead of going for Edwin. And with a pretty decent board already, I honestly wouldn't hate the idea of just going Paladin Secret, insert 2-mana Secret here, and then again a Paladin Secret thereafter.
The name of the game for Leta, though, is how can he maneuver this Rotnest Drake to get a good target, primarily that Hanar. Makes things very awkward for him, but I'm definitely sensing the Desert Spear on the horizon here, not just for immediate impact, which is relatively low, but because you can continuously get that extra 2 damage parceled out however you like through the rest of the turns. It has snowballing effects, this Desert Spear.
It's tough because I'm looking at like all the different ways you can go, because you could go swing into Hanar and then attack with the 1-1 into Hanar. You can go double attack into the poison, but then it can trade into the 2-2. But then maybe that's okay because a poisonous minion has died. So many layers to it, but I think I like this idea of incentivizing the poison minion to trade.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't, and let's say Alutemu has a second backstab, you can still kill it off. And then as long as Leta puts himself in the best position to isolate the Hanar, that's all he wants, is to get that good Rotnest Drake for the next turn. But Alutemu presented with very interesting options. Freezing Trap doesn't look great because of Desert Spear, but Bamboozle, even though it's been cut from a bunch of lists, is synergy because Leta wants to attack into a minion next turn, almost guaranteed.
Yeah, it's pretty good here. It kind of disincentivizes you from going for the Edwin plan, I suppose, if that's what he wants to go for.
Yeah, but in the end, if he is taking the Edwin line here, I can respect going for not Bamboozle, of course.
That makes sense.
And if Alutemu wants to play his best around the Rotnest Drake, he can use the Dagger Hanar trade, preserve his 2-1. I guess that's not taking into account the Desert Spear, which could still put 2 minions after that. So it's completely fine.
Yeah, I think it was very close anyway. For Leta now, the Rotnest Drake I think is fairly clean, because even with any of the Paladin secrets, you're still able to guarantee a clear. Even if it's Redemption, you can obviously just swing in with the Desert Spear.
Yeah, and I do think between those two targets, despite Hanar being very threatening there, that the Edwin was the one that Leta wanted to snipe. Because on the following turn, if Alutemu goes for a bunch of secrets, he actually has a Zephyrus Flare option, no joke, with Fairy Dragon to fill out that entire curve. But now Alutemu also has an option of just playing Shield of Galakrond. Zephyrus Flare might just be...
So many options.
It might be. I mean, the weird thing is for Alutemu, though, that a lot of these secrets, the Freezing Trap in particular, it's not that good with Desert Spear already equipped. And so I think Leta could potentially just navigate through the majority of these secrets, even without knowing face up what they are. With just the Desert Spear alone, it works its way through the majority of the bad Hunter ones.
But Alutemu knows that freezing isn't great versus Desert Spear, who's starting off with the other secret he got as an activator. And
So
now,
many
pressure plate is a bit difficult to justify because Hunter doesn't play all that many spells. So Alutemu's going for max mana utilization here. And I wouldn't mind just the cheapest one for the follow-up. Makes the turn smoother if he's gonna play Shield of Galakrond. I'm not kidding about Zephyrus Flare. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I don't know. Looks good to me, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that if any of them are like when you play a minion secrets, then you don't even get much value off of it, but you still wouldn't know until you've picked off of Zephyrus what they were going to be.
Okay, so in terms of when you play minion, yeah, ambush is one, but he did see one ambush already. So the Dirty Tricks is more likely on his other side. The Mage one, though, strong argument for Mirror Entity being a possibility. And I doubt that you ever want to really take Repentance if you're Alutemu.
So I guess by that argument, you could start with Fairy Dragon, and then if all of the secrets are still intact, then Zephyrus into the Flare would look pretty okay.
Interesting. Or the Primordial Drake to just finish the turn. But yeah, as it turns out, there are two secrets that are immediately activated by playing a minion. So Leta there gets pretty... it's hard to say rewarded, because that Evasive Worm is super annoying for him. Means he has to leave up the Poison Minion. But it's definitely a better board state that it would have looked if he had just gone Zephyrus Flare there.
Yeah, I think he had everything taken into account, though. The fact that he had a 1-1 on board to deal with the Divine Shield meant he knew that even in the case of the Evasive Worm being copied, he can still take it out very, very cleanly. And he knew that the Paladin secret as well was not Redemption, I believe, so that wasn't even too much of a scary possibility.
For Alutemu, this looks like a Flick turn, but it's going into the turn 7, in which case you probably wish you had Flick as an answer for either of the big threats in Tiamat or Dinotamer Bran. And in theory, it looks like the best type of board to play a Freezing Trap into, but the Desert Spear again makes this super awkward.
I will act as your scale.
You ever just Kronks? Oh, well, not this turn.
Yeah, he's just liking the fact that he can get a, I suppose, pretty annoying Shield of Galakrond here. But even as I say that, it just trades pretty cleanly with the Redemption and the Desert Spear again working its magic.
Didn't look all that annoying to me. Leta, of course, has to be cognizant of Noble Sacrifice. That very much looked like a straight-up bluff from Alutemu, but because Desert Spear gets 2 damage parceled out across 2 attacks, it's going to be very efficient for Leta here nonetheless.
The annoying thing for Leta, though, is that he can actually start working this one down to being exactly eye for an eye, at which point tanking 8 damage is kind of scary.
Nah, he sticks the king, it's fine, right? You go down to 13 versus Rogue with no eviscerates. I think it's totally fine for him to go down. Leta is going to disagree, and the 8-4 King Crush, to be fair, is still very threatening.
Yeah, I think this wasn't even a case so much of thinking about eye for an eye. It's just I'd rather value trade and stick more minions on the board. Because like you said, there are no eviscerates in the deck, so this 8-4 King Crush is fairly well positioned. It's tough for Alutemu to clear.
Yeah, that's right. Not so much a matter of damage, but making flick the least effective as possible going into this turn, and that was very well spotted by Leta. Alutemu praying for a bailout here, but he gets just a reroll on the Ethereal Lackey essentially. It's looking to be if he can find a way to clear out a small minion and a big minion and then isolate the last one with Freezing Trap, that would be a win for Alutemu. But even Betrayal is not a good option here because Leta has positioned around that. Love it.
It's a very clean play, and it's just what we've seen consistently from Leta, I think, over the course of this tournament. As I said earlier on, I think this is far from the last that we will see from him, no matter what the outcome of this grand final between him and Alutemu. But I gotta say, even with the flick coming down, it's still looking good for him here, very likely with the Zephyrus still in hand to be able to find some kind of a lethal over the next couple of turns.
Alutemu stepping the Ethereal Lackey there is a curious choice for a minion to step, but I think returning the flick to his hand is too much negative tempo, and Alutemu simply doesn't have the time to go for Kronk steps, so he is just getting the value out of that card while he guaranteed can. But for Leta, I am remiss to say what exactly Zephyrus gives if you were to play it here, so I'm defaulting towards a dragon and hero power here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you that if it was Huffer, Zephyrus would have given Savage Roar and he would have won the game on the spot.
Right.
So I think that's what he was moving towards first of all with that Animal Companion line. But I agree. At this point with Zephyrus, you're really looking to hit, the Inner Demon, Savage Roar, Bloodlust, whatever it may be, to just close out the game. So I like the idea of shipping everything that you can to the face and weaving in those hero powers.
There's a small argument for taking a value trade on the flick by using Guardian Aug Merchant for the Divine Shield. I guess we need to think about then what are the scary consequences of leaving up the flick. Shadow Step, you've seen a bunch of them already, and all of the minions are different names on board. So the very best that Alutemu could hope for from this, I suppose, is a Witchy Lackey, which is not a guaranteed positive in any stretch of the imagination.
I think it's such a clever line from Leta. I've seen this so consistently for him with these aggro game plans that he always sees the third option. If we're looking at two different paths, there's always another way to go about it, and he seems to always find it. And I always love it. I think it's just a great recognition from him here. Protect the taunt that is protecting the rest of his minions and allow them as the battering ram to just beat down the rogue and take the win very cleanly.
It is so true. Alutemu here can find a way to survive on board, though the Fan of Knives does quite a bit, especially since he can end the turn with Freezing Trap, so he can isolate the Evasive Worm. Oh, or if you pick up Kobold Lackey and Pharaoh Cat from that, that's an even better way of going about this. A completely empt on Leta's side now. But Zephyrus... Oh, man.
It's close. It's so close.
Lethal.
That is lethal. Fireball will be able to close this one out, which brings Leta just in the nick of time up to 2-1. I thought Alutemu right at the end there might have been able to find the time with Kronks into Galakrond to take the win, but we are going to see Leta going up in stunning fashion here to 2-1, a single game of Hearthstone away from being crowned as the champion of Masters Tour APAC.
I can't believe I wanted to use Zephyrus for Flare. Imagine. I mean, that was very, very well spotted from Leta. Accounting for all of the possibilities is so difficult when you're playing against secrets from all of the classes. I can hardly do that when you're playing around secrets from one class. But Leta managed to navigate that turn without having to use Zephyrus for a frivolous effect, I do say so myself, and then ended up being heavily rewarded there. I do have to point out, though, what you were talking about of had it not been additional damage off the top deck, Leta was just a little bit short of lethal there. And maybe we could have seen Alutemu put together a comeback off of the Galakrond, but even then he would have had to deal counter lethal really soon. Otherwise, the hero powers would have just gotten there for Leta. So that does put Leta in the lead now. Only has to win with his own rogue versus the Mirror and Highlander Hunter.
He does indeed, and he is just flying the flag of this stealth rogue. Many players have put this version to the wayside in the wake of the nerfs to Demon Hunter, because I know that there was some debate over the statistics of it, but I think generally the idea with stealth rogue was that you had 2 spy mysteries on one, you had Eviscerate as well for a bit of extra clear. It was just a bit more robust in the early game in being able to clear off all the minions. But here Leta is saying he just doesn't want the value from the secrets. He doesn't want to, spend his time without proactively developing the board. And the benefit he gets from that, in my opinion, is a slightly more consistent early game in terms of keeping the board clear, and also just a much more aggressive late game. 2 Eviscerates in the deck can make a staggering amount of difference.
Yes, the Eviscerates are among the first cards to be cut in these packages. That's something that Alutemu needs to be highly aware of. Although I will say the lack of Blackjack Stunners is something that Hunter is usually pretty happy about, because it is one of the most punishing cards against this particular class. Leta again with the fire start of 1-drop Coin and Edwin in the opener. Evil Miscreant also a card that is likely to be kept here. Without Shadow Step though, Leta Edwin is not good enough for the immediate.
Oh man, that is an interesting one, because I've got to be honest, even though your game plan was most likely Pharaoh Cat Coin Miscreant, I still would quite like Edwin in that starting hand, to be honest. Even if it's just on turn 4, Lackey plus Edwin for a 4-4, sign me up. That's still just a strong tempo play that you are making there.
I guess that would have made his turn 3 a little bit awkward, but it's a very good point. For Alutemu, though, that tracking was so painful. All of those cards are useful in the matchup. I would say Rotnest Drake may be diminished a little bit in value versus Rogue Lackeys and Garbage that can serve as scapegoats, but losing Desert Spear for that reason, dealing with the Lackeys, is so painful.
Yeah, joke's on you, Rotnest. My deck is full of garbage.
Well, train of is beginning for Leta, but Alutemu has a pretty good response to either of these minions if he wants with the Scale Rider. It's just annoying that it lines up perfectly into a Seal Fate. As long as Leta keeps the full health on his Fairy Dragon, though, I think Alutemu's happy with that because it's one of his most valuable aggressive resources.
This is really starting to come together for Leta, though. I am seeing some mighty powerful plays coming together in the next few turns. Prep with a questing, and he was just able to pick up a spell off of the Ethereal Lackey as well. Not only are the Lackeys already just doing an incredible job of dominating the board, his follow-up is looking to be a very, very robust one indeed.
The Prep Fan of Knives with questing is kind of disgusting. But Alutemu has a decent way to go about clearing this board. I guess it's still kind of awkward, right? Even if you take Arcane Explosion, the Zephyrus on the other side, generated by Faceless Lackey, is looking kind of gross.
Yeah, Arcane Explosion is definitely what I have my eyes on here. Because even if you do have to trade your Fairy Dragon, so what? I think you're pretty happy there. The only difference is that you could just go for Sea Giant here.
Yeah, I was strongly eyeing that because he took that trade into the Miscreant before playing the Zephyrus. I guess he had already committed into this line of play, but it was interesting, Dark.
Very, very much so.
Good thing is he does end up with a full board of no 1/1s to make essentially an Arcane Explosion on the other side less effective as well.
And I do think Leta will probably deviate away from the Prep Fan, or even the questing Prep Seal play here. I'm wondering if it's just Prep Seal plus Miscreant instead to keep those Lackeys rolling, which have been doing such a good job so far.
Prep Seal definitely, with the questing, looked like my first instinct here because of Rotnest Drake, and you don't really want to be feeding the questing adventure as a good target for that. But if it's not there, though, the dividends are pretty huge, you have to admit.
That is true. Being able to divert from the other 5-mana plays, primarily being a big old whelp here, is huge, because that is, while not categorically locked out as a play here for Alutemu, it carries a hefty downside at this point.
He's still mousing over it. Oh my. Well, yeah, it's because of the hefty downside you were talking about. If Alutemu wants to get rid of questing, it involves a trade, and I'm just going or Hero Power, which is extremely slow, or Stormhammer, which is extremely slow. Maybe Alutemu was saying, you just played your Miscreant, a prep, a bunch of lackeys. The questing can't grow all that much bigger next turn, can it?
I like your reasoning. I think it's big ol' whelp as well. Even in the disaster case, I suppose that the questing just gets super massive. You have a next turn. You can use that to the 3-2 that still survives the next turn.
Super massive questing adventure, my new rock band. He is going to take the safe play though, which the benefit of this still and developing the Dwarven Sharpshooter means that Varanus is still pretty effective on the following turn. And that's a dragon, so he gets a free swing with the Stormhammer if he wants it.
Leta does have here the Babby Reno combo whenever he wants to go for it as well, of Ancestral Guardian plus Rush Lackey here. This is, at the best of times, a powerful combo, or I suppose I should say at the worst of times, but it was the best of times here, where it can hopefully get multiple hits in and heal multiple times against Alutemu.
Big draw for Alutemu though. This turn looked miserable had he not drawn that Guardian Aug Merchant, but now he's able to get the clear on both halves of the Ancestral Guardian and get ahead on board, heading into the Varanus turn. This is super back and forth, and right now for the first time it seems like in this game Leta is falling behind a little bit.
That one really, really stings for Leta, it's got to be said. He has powerful follow-up, of course, at this point in the game. Just a straight-up Kronks play on this turn does not look disastrous at all at first glance. But instead, he is opting again to just go wide on the board, which has been a strong game plan so far against the Hunter.
Always problematic against a deck that runs very little AoE, and Alutemu's options are very limited here. Varanus not really effective for its battle cry, but it's the most threat he can put on board because Imprisoned Felmaw, even though it lets him use most of his mana with the hero power, is not going to be active for a very long time. The flip side is true though, where if you play Varanus, then the turn 8 is looking very awkward towards the 2 drops.
That is where I'm leaning. I mean, with the Varanus, it's not as singular large minions are not especially weak against this version of Rogue because it's not running saps. It obviously doesn't have the Blackjack stunners, but just Eviscerate on its own can deal with the the lion's share of Varanus's health. And at that point, you're falling behind pretty far in terms of tempo. But if you look at it the other way, Bone Chewer Brawler only has 3 health, and then you've effectively dealt with the entire board that way.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Between those two, now that I look at it again, if you're just hoping that the Eviscerate is not there either way, then you might as well take the upside of the guaranteed 7 attack minion hitting the board. The game plan for Alutemu definitely looks to be a lot of damage pointed at the face very soon. But I can easily just as well see it from his perspective, where he hasn't seen the big minions hit the board yet for Leta. He hasn't seen Shield of Galakron or Kronks, so maybe the battle cry is too valuable for him there.
One thing I will say, Gia, is that if we are indecisive about what the best plays are here, I guarantee you that Alutemu is as well. We can tell purely from his body language. We've watched a lot of Alutemu over the recent months playing Hearthstone, and I think he just does not know what the best play is, to be perfectly honest. He's giving it his best shot, obviously, every single turn. But he does seem pretty indecisive based on what cards he's mousing over about what the best way to go is.
And it is a huge swing for the last turn. He picks up Galakron, puts together yet another annoying board for Hunter to deal with, and has bought himself the time by kind of distracting Alutemu's hard hitters with these small minions that he could very easily take the swing soon, if not from the battle cry of Galakron itself, with the Kronks later on.
I mean, I'm thinking it's just got to be Varanus on this turn. It enables you to take another swing, which wouldn't be otherwise available, even though the battle cry does literally nothing. But it's still just the only way I think that he can start keep fighting for board.
It's painful not getting any battle cry value at all, but I tend to agree. Alutemu knows that he's falling behind here, and while the Alexstrasza is available next turn, it's not going to give him much of a board presence until the following turn. So he's just going to throw this big threat onto the board. Hopefully, one or two of these can connect face and rely on some top deck burst from there on out. And there's not even a hope for top decking Desert Spear to have to deal with these because he discarded it all that time ago in favor of Zephyrus for the tracking. So painful.
That is a great point. And yet another power card found for Leta. Probably not the play on this turn, given that the wand is unplayable right now. But just for the turns to come, this is a litany of choices for Leta.
Letany.
Yep, good job.
I regretted it as soon as I said it, but you know what?
So
This
many
flick is
options.
looking pretty brutal here for Alutemu. At the same time, though, it's the least, I would say, powerful of Leta's options here because both the Togwaggle and the Galakrond are advancing his own game plan of winning. But based on the way the hands have shaped out, where he's seen Alutemu have to deal very awkward damage every turn and run him out of resources, I like that Leta's still taking the defensive here, and his health total allows him to do just that.
Yeah, I agree so completely. I think that with the... Even if you go for Galakrond there and you tank the damage, you're not winning the game next turn. Even with Kronk's Battlecry thrown in there as well for 5 extra damage, your opponent is still likely to be able to put up a defensive enough answer.
Alutemu is on his last legs. He's seen an eviscerate, so he might not be worried about immediate lethal, but he has to know that Alexstrasza alone this turn is very slow. It's the only option, don't get me wrong. I don't like the look of Kill Command Frizz. And probably pray for some miracles here. I've seen Nozaris screw people over in similar situations.
Life and hope of world fighting.
Just praying, first of all, that he can survive the turn, and second of all, that these are some impressive dragons. But while Deathwing Mad Aspect is nice there, I don't know that it's going to be enough to pull him back in the game.
Here comes the Tier 2 Galakrond. Nothing immediately impactful,
Okay.
but Leta just needs to hold on to his advantage here. And Shadowstep Flick is not available this turn anymore because of the mana spent, but he can just put together that same annoying board, and as long as Alutemu didn't get too crazy of a dragon, he
Yeah.
still seems to be in a great spot. Just got word though that Leta and Alutemu actually faced off already in round 9 of this tournament, where Leta took the series 3-1, and that could be a repeat of history.
Time is a flat circle, Gia. History has a way of repeating itself, as it looks like it may do here, unless Alutemu can find a miracle outcome that I'm not even really seeing what it could be. Even without any minions on the board at all, Leta has Kronk's Step, Kronk's 10 damage, closing out the game.
It's so funny that the Alex being on board is actually actively stopping Alutemu's Deathwing from being good here. It could have been a full. And yeah, that's not even counting, of course, as you mentioned, the Kronk's lethal. There's no healing left because Zephyrus has been used. Leta has all of his bases covered. And as much as it breaks my heart to say, it looks like Alutemu will win at the very end here. Still not an empty APAC champion for us, but nothing to turn your chin up at it. And a very impressive run. And for Leta, also taking down a GM from every single region to put himself in the best position of becoming a GM in the near future. What a story.
It's such a well-deserved win here for Leta, I must say, as finally Alutemu gives it all he's got, but Leta throws on the shades. It's easy for him, man. He is able to win the entirety of Masters Tour Asia Pacific Online. He is our champion, and boy does he do it with style.
This reminds me so much of when Alutemu did the exact same thing in Masters Tour and Grandmasters APAC.
Oh.
Leta completely deserved, no matter what BM or flexing he wants to throw out there. I wish he would show us his face on camera, because even if he's crying out of happiness, he completely deserves the entire spotlight here. An incredible run, and now he is the champion of Masters Tour Online Asia Pacific.
Yeah, such a great performance from him. He has been one of the best performing players over the entire Masters Tour circuit. And at this point, while he is not guaranteed, I believe, to make it through to GM, given that we consider all 6 of this year's Masters Tour events when we head into 2021 Grandmasters, as far away as that may seem, he is in such a great spot to get there now. It is very, very likely that finally, not only for him, he's going to get that spot in GM, well deserved, but also for the entire Italian Hearthstone community. One that has just been, I think, sorely underrepresented in both Grandmasters and at the top of the Masters Tour events as well. I'm sure they could not be happier for Leta to finally take a win here. And again, just in stunning fashion, I think with these aggressive decks that he's been piloting, the Demon Hunter, the Highlander Hunter, he's just been playing so well, finding these weird lines that I wouldn't otherwise have spotted. And again, deservedly being the winner.
I think it's not an exaggeration to say that Leta has been playing out of his mind throughout at least what I've seen of him in top 8. So many lines that neither you nor I spotted. Extremely well played. And I have to say, the series, the game he did end up losing in this series was to something he really could not account for, the 0 mana Malagos. And still, he put himself in pretty much the best spots every single turn. And you know what, Darek? This might be the first Masters Tour in what feels like forever where we haven't had a French player in top 8. But Leta with the deck name, très bien, and whatever else, baguette in there, the magic worked. And now I can guarantee you every single player in Masters Tour from here on out will be naming their decks in French, possibly even switching the Hearthstone client into the French language.
Yeah, exactly. You got to do everything you can in order to steal some of their magic in order to get the job done. But let's take for a final time a look at our top 8 that we fought through today, because it seems like a long time ago now that very early in the morning for me, we sat down to see Old Boy versus Alutemu, at which point he was able to take the win. RNG Lee, Tice again taking the victory as the second GM to do so. Bunny Hopper being the third GM out of our 4 matches in the quarterfinals to get through. But unfortunately for Saiyan, he was not able to close it out as a 4 for 4 GMs in the semi-final. And thankfully for Leta, he was able to get through and, as you can see, continue all the way to the win. I mean, just look at the star power that he's worked through to get to this point here.
It was an absolute boss rush of fights he had to do to get to this point. Just saying, Bunny Hopper, Alutemu, Lorinda said it, it's a GM from every single region he has defeated to get to this point. Absolutely, incredibly well-deserved. And this entire top 8, I have to take my hat off to them because it has been an incredible final day of this tournament.
It really has. Leta doing a great job, not only taking down all these incredible players, but also, as we said earlier, taking down Alutemu twice with the same score over the course of this tournament. And it is just such a brilliant way for us to close things out in this weekend. A wonderful few days of Hearthstone here. And I think a great way for us to close out the Ashes of Outlands meta in terms of a competitive sense. It's only a little while now until we move on to Scholarman's Academy. Some of those new cards, if you haven't seen them, are looking very spicy indeed. But with the Demon Hunter coming through right at the start and many, many patches along the way in order to bring it in line, it's been quite the metagame that we've got to come to this point, Gia.
That's right. And for anybody who isn't aware, if you log in right now, you can get free 2 copies of Transfer Student, the first preview card from the new expansion. And already that's a card that is dividing opinions amongst players and already making us casters scratch our heads at, do we really have to memorize game boards from here on out? And yes, we do. But you know what? I'm excited. It's going to be a while before we're back on broadcast again. But I want to say thank you to everybody who has tuned in throughout this week. You guys are hyped for the next season of Grandmasters and all Hearthstone esports to come.
That's right. We're going to be back with Grandmasters in just a few short weeks' time, where unfortunately we won't be seeing, of course, Leta quite yet. He will be hopefully qualifying through in the 2021 season, but there will be a few new GMs in each of the region thanks to the previous Masters Tour events from this year. So I will say, to repeat what Gia said, thank you so much for all of you who joined us along the way. I've had an absolute blast of a time here in Masters Tour APAC Online. And so from the rest of the casters, all of production, and of course Leta as our Masters Tour APAC Online champion, we want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time for some more Hearthstone.